So you've been meditating, seeing a therapist, and reading all the books. You're sticking to a healthy diet and taking all the supplements. You're journaling daily, you're reprogramming old beliefs and working with affirmations. You're doing the inner child work, and maybe you've even done plant medicine. And yet, you feel frustrated because you're not making the progress that you want, and you're still struggling with anxiety, depression, or burnout. And you still find yourself in the same unhealthy relationships or attracting emotionally unavailable people. You're still dealing with the same triggers and repeating old patterns, and maybe you're worried that you will never be happy or loved or fulfilled, and that it will never get better. Or perhaps, like me back then, you're wondering if something is wrong with you. And I get it, trust me. I've experienced all of this many times. I felt stuck so many times on my healing journey, even though I felt like I was doing all the things and more. So in this video, I want to share with you the 3 things I wish I had known on my own healing journey. Because for me, they were the keys to true healing and changing my patterns, and ultimately, the keys to finding love and happiness and inner peace. And so I wish the same for you. So if you're also frustrated and hopeless, just like I was back then this video is for you. So let's get into it. We have to go beyond the surface and understand the many dimensions and types of traumas and how they work and how trauma affects our psyche, our nervous system, and our bodies. And you need to take a closer look at your biography and especially early life experiences and acknowledge them for what they truly are. The reality is, we've all experienced trauma in one way or another. Trauma is part of the human experience. And important to note here is that trauma is actually not the event itself, but what happens inside of us, the wounding, the unprocessed emotions and incomplete stress reflexes that live inside of you as a result of a stressful and overwhelming experience. And you might think that your childhood was normal or it wasn't too bad because you weren't abused or you didn't have any horrific experiences happen to you. But trauma isn't just when big, terrible things happen, like war or accidents or sexual or violent abuse. Trauma is more than shock trauma or big T trauma. It's not just when bad things happen to us, but also when good things that should have happened didn't happen. Maybe we didn't receive what we needed for healthy development as children. Maybe we didn't get the needed attention from our parents. Maybe you didn't get enough physical touch. Maybe we learned to suppress our emotions. Maybe we didn't feel seen or heard. Maybe we didn't feel supported and encouraged in just our being and our capabilities. And maybe our parents just weren't emotionally available. Maybe we experienced anger outbursts from our parents, or on the other end of the spectrum, the expression of anger or any emotion was suppressed and judged, criticized, and we learned to not be angry or sad at all. Maybe your parents got divorced, or one parent was struggling with substance abuse or health issues. All of this is what we call developmental trauma and attachment wounding. And the list of examples really is very, very long. And nearly everyone I know, even those who had well-intentioned parent figures, grew up with unmet emotional needs. And this has wide-ranging effects. As little people, we get impaired in our natural development and in our potential. It also affects brain development and the imprinting of our developing nervous system. It impacts how we see ourselves and experience others, how we understand and process our emotions, and how we experience the world as a whole. It's where negative core beliefs come from, a negative sense of self, a lack of trust, shame, anxiety, depression, self-blame, maybe a feeling of numbness and disconnection, isolation and loneliness. difficulty concentrating, and an inability to regulate our emotions. Some of us, we end up being people pleasers and have a lack of boundaries. So any type of trauma also affects our physical health and can cause things like gut issues, sleep problems, panic attacks, chronic pain, headaches, addiction, fatigue, or eating disorders. Plus, attachment wounding in childhood impacts our relationship skills and how we attach to other people. And so in adulthood, this can manifest in difficult and unhealthy or codependent relationship dynamics, problems with intimacy, and so on. But this is not about just blaming our parents or caretakers, not at all. No matter how loving, caring, and well-intentioned our original caregivers were, they were only humans and therefore had imperfections and dysfunctions themselves. They experienced their own traumas, probably when they were growing up. And then they pass it on to us. There's no one to blame, really. It's a simple fact. We're often very protective of and loyal to our parents, and we refuse to look at how they might have messed us up, which is also a natural protective mechanism for humans. But what's important to understand here is, as children, we sacrifice our authentic expression and emotions in order to stay connected. Attachment trumps authenticity, as Gabor Mate likes to say. And so children adapt their behaviors to survive and maintain relationships to their caretakers. Our behaviors were once a form of protection and eventually turned into patterns. Another reason we might not remember our traumas is what is called childhood amnesia. The deepest injuries often happened at a very young age. We're often unable to explicitly remember them. The part of the brain responsible for memories, the hippocampus, it doesn't come fully online until we're about 2 or 3 years old, and even then, it keeps developing until we're about 7 years. And so many of us have had traumatic experiences that we invalidated or minimized, kind of like, oh, it wasn't that bad, or we simply didn't even know they were considered trauma or didn't think they had much of an impact on us in our lives. And we normalize certain experiences, and it's not our fault really. It's our conditioning and programming from our culture. Some types of traumas that fly under the radar, for example, are birth traumas, medical traumas, and some accidents. And for instance, I had a complicated birth with the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. And I also had to spend several days in an incubator due to jaundice. And that's actually some rough stuff for a little newborn baby. And I didn't understand the implications of that until a few years ago, actually. Or I recently broke my wrist pretty badly skateboarding last year, and I needed surgery. And I didn't realize that my nervous system was still stuck in a trauma response from that weeks later, but it became clear with time as I had a really low capacity for stress, and I struggled to feel safe when going on simple walks. So in a nutshell, trauma is when our systems get overwhelmed and stay stuck in a stress response, or what we call fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. The good news is that we don't need to remember our traumas in order to embark on the path of trauma healing. Our current thinking, behaviors, and relationship patterns are a good indication of what happened back then. Not wanting to look at our painful past can keep us stuck in the past. And my advice is to allow ourselves to truly look into where our needs might not have been met when we were growing up, and start connecting to some of the unfelt anger and grief. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable and painful, but it is the only way forward in my experience and from working with many clients. And I also like to say the only way out is through, not above, not below, it's through. All I can tell you is that it's worth it. And I also highly recommend working with a somatic psychotherapist trained in maybe somatic experiencing or NARM or Hakomi. I highly encourage you to learn about the different trauma responses like fight, flight, freeze, shutdown, and fawn in order to make sense of your own experiences. And reading books like The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate and It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolin. I really wish I understood this one way earlier on my journey. The nervous system and the stress response explain everything in terms of our patterns, how we think and feel, and how we react. They are the most primitive parts of our biology, and we need to learn how they work to understand ourselves better and why we behave and feel the way we do, especially when we're experiencing stress, which, by the way, is our body's response to anything that requires attention or action. Everyone experiences stress to some degree. In your relationships, at work, maybe getting angry in itself is a stressor, and financial worries is a stressor, past trauma as well, and lots more that we're often not aware of. What's important to know is that any stress and trauma comes with a charge in our nervous system. And there are 3 states we inhabit at any point in time. When everything's running smoothly and we're feeling relaxed and connected, we're in parasympathetic mode. When our stress response is triggered, we either shift into sympathetic activation mode, also called fight or flight, or if there's no way out and we're completely overwhelmed, we move into shutdown or freeze. The body literally plays dead. Unprocessed trauma and suppressed emotions lead to what we call a narrowing of our window of tolerance. It's like there's a constant stress response running in the background, like a bunch of stressful tabs open in your browser. So if you struggle with anxiety, depression, anxious attachment, overthinking, rumination, sadness, you're stuck in a sympathetic mode or shutdown. You move into those states very quickly and struggle to get out of them. Also, we often keep living high intensity and stressful lives because that's what's familiar to us. But this also keeps the stress response going. And if you didn't experience a consistent sense of safety and connection in childhood, your nervous system most probably struggles to regulate itself. And you might have a hard time soothing yourself when you're emotionally triggered. So understanding how the nervous system works is a complete game changer because you get to sit in the driver's seat of your experience and ultimately your life. Learning how to shift your states can be incredibly transformative on your healing journey because when you change your state, you change how you feel, how you think, and how you act. This is about creating autonomic awareness and establishing daily practices. It's just not enough to go to therapy once a week, but not doing much else outside of the session. So here's my advice. Learn about the polyvagal theory and the different trauma responses in the body. Explore the ways you use coping strategies to artificially self-regulate and distract yourself when you feel stressed or you're experiencing intense emotions. We unconsciously develop systems to not feel, and that's what we call coping. And maybe you get on your phone and you start scrolling for hours. Maybe you dive into work or intense exercise. Maybe you drink alcohol or eat chocolate. There's lots of ways that we cope. Just because we don't feel something, it doesn't mean it just disappears. Because here's a newsflash, it doesn't. So learn to regulate your nervous system and how to activate your vagus nerve using breathing practices and other somatic techniques. So making changes also to your lifestyle and slowing down to support your healing will really make a difference. A long time ago, the Western world moved toward a rational mind-first culture, essentially the mind dominating the body. We all mainly have a great relationship with our thoughts. We think our anxiety or depression or struggles are a mind problem, when in reality, they're a feeling problem. Like, when has it ever worked out for you to tell yourself to just stop thinking, to stop being anxious or stop being angry? Many of us try to fix and heal ourselves with our minds, such as talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, mindset work, using affirmations, reprogramming our limiting beliefs, positive thinking, reading books. But it turns out limiting beliefs, low self-worth, anxiety or depression, they're symptoms. They're not the root cause of our issues. The root cause is usually an early, deep emotional wounding that we're intellectualizing and thinking instead of feeling through the root causes. And what we're essentially doing is bypassing our emotions. And the reason your affirmations don't work is because your body and your nervous system, they don't believe your words. They are in a different state than what your words are trying to tell them. Many of us, including me back then, we use spiritual practices and explanations to dismiss or avoid our pain and complex emotion. It's more comfortable to chase bliss states and in meditation and embrace non-duality and non-attachment, or we use manifestation practices, the law of attraction, and raise our frequency or vibration. For example, many spiritual teachings believe that anger is a low frequency emotion and that love is a high frequency emotion. But in the world of the nervous system and the body, there is no high or low frequency. All emotions are equal. And this is, in my opinion, really the shadow part of the self-development world. Thinking that we can solve all our issues by changing our mindsets and our habits, to just think positive, to just do it, to just change our habits, just want it bad enough. It's a very effective coping mechanism to stay up in our heads, to mentally construct whatever it is that we're feeling, to attach to our stories. Talking and thinking, it becomes like a safe space because feeling is really the ultimate threat. We might think like, ooh, I got this really beautiful insight, in my therapy session or in this plant medicine ceremony, or, whoa, I really see this differently now after having a coaching session, or as we're reading tons of self-help books. But insight doesn't get us far. It gives us a temporary dopamine high in the end, and then we confuse insight with embodiment, which is what is ultimately needed for true healing and integration. Healing is not about insight. Healing is about embodiment. If you could think your way out of depression, anxiety, and all of your problems, you would have done it by now. The fact is, trauma is stored in a part of the brain that we cannot access via words. It's the body where we experience emotions and ultimately where we experience life. The thing is, we can't heal a feeling issue with a thinking approach. For one, there's no separation between mind and body. Your mind is your body. Both affect each other. Have a look at the ACE study. ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experience. And this study found a direct link between childhood trauma and adult onset of chronic disease. It's quite fascinating. Secondly, cognitive inner work is highly limited. Why? Because trauma and stressful early childhood experiences are stored in a part of the brain that we cannot access via words. Often, these events happen when we didn't even know how to speak yet. Plus, our conscious mind only makes up about 5% of our experience. The other 95% then is processed unconsciously, so our body and autonomic nervous system are our unconscious. What we think we know in our mind is really only the tip of the iceberg of our human experience. When we experience trauma, we tend to dissociate. We basically leave our bodies because whatever we are experiencing is too overwhelming. It's too much to feel and be with. And so healing means coming back home to our body to reconnect to our somatic experience. And in order to truly heal, we need to create a deeper relationship with our body and our emotions. Instead of only focusing on top-down strategies to healing, using the mind to influence the mind and body, we want to include bottom-up strategies, using our body to influence our physical, mental, and emotional state. Just think about it. Our nervous system consists of 80% of afferent neurons, which move from the body to the brain, in contrast to roughly only 20% of efferent neurons, which run in the opposite direction, from the brain to the body. And as a result, these bottom-up interventions, or practices that leverage our physiology and those that we call somatics, are 4 times more effective at altering our blood chemistry, shifting our state, and transform trauma and old patterns. So, in summary, we can use the body to reprogram the nervous system and therefore reprogram our experience in life. We have to relearn the language of the body and our emotions, and their language is sensations. We have to truly learn to feel our emotions, not think our emotions, but actually feel them in our bodies. As long as there is a part within us that doesn't want to feel the sadness, the anger, the shame, the loneliness, they will keep showing up. It's the resistance to our emotions that causes the pain, not the emotions themselves. If you as a child growing up stored the fear of losing a parent in your body and you never fully felt this fear and the grief that's beneath it, you might be repeating patterns of rejection and abandonment as an adult. When we don't fully feel something and we keep suppressing these emotions, we'll keep repeating the same patterns. But once we allow ourselves to fully feel something, the pattern can stop. So this was a lot, huh? Now, the good news is what is called neuroplasticity, meaning your brain and nervous system can change. It doesn't matter how old you are and how long you've been struggling, but it takes many repetitions for new neural pathways to be built. Which brings me to the not so good news. True, lasting healing will take a while. There is no quick fix. Yes, healing takes time because we can't rush healing. We can't pull on grass to make it grow faster. But it also doesn't have to feel like Groundhog Day forever. And I can tell you from experience that things can shift even if they didn't for a long time. We have to realize that we're often working against a lifetime of neurosomatic programming, especially when it comes to developmental trauma and attachment wounding. The healing journey is an ascending spiral. It's not a circle. You might have to continuously come back to things you thought you understood and healed so that you can experience yourself in a deeper way, integrate them in a new way, and realize how much you've actually grown. And if you want to learn more about my own trauma healing journey and why it took me 11 years, I invite you to watch this video. In future videos, I will share more about some of the things I spoke about in this video in more detail. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. And with that, much love and see you soon.